Welcome to Scene, where the art world meets the real world. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with emerging and established artists to offer a genuine glimpse into their lives and minds, all in an authentic and totally straightforward manner. I'm Carrie Scott, your host. And with 2 decades of experience as a curator and art historian, I firmly believe in the transformative power of art, if it's seen. Have you seen Nancy Cadogan's work? They're like a peaceful escape. And yet it occurred to me during our chat that Nancy needs these works. Nancy needs this tranquility almost as much as we do. I think she's capturing these sort of cozy interiors, these soft lit, calming visual retreats, because they're perfect moments for her to find peace in a world that is so chaotic. So that these gifts to herself and to us. And I think that's extraordinary, and where art starts to make both the viewer and the artist feel better, there's magic. Nancy Cadogan, thank you so much for doing this. I feel like this one has been building up for a little while. Like, we've talked about doing this interview for weeks, maybe months.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth me saying this out loud for anyone that is paying attention, that the love affair with your work was kind of like weirdly instant, like in a when you know kind of way.
Oh,
because
so nice.
Well, but it's true. I fell for your work, and I continue to fall for your work in this very emotional way, which is not something that I'm super used to, right? I get emotional about like big political work or hard hitting or heavy work. And your paintings are not overtly that, but I think that underneath it all, there is this giant message that I read in it that comes to me as a like, hey, just take a minute. Do you think that's true, or is that
absolutely
accurate?
And a kind of message to myself as well? Pause, stop, think, breathe. See yourself in a greater arc. Take a step back.
And has that always been there? Take us through like the arc of your career. You started as a like grown up en plein air painter, right?
Yeah, so exactly. So I went to art school, and I went through the motion. I just decided as a teenager, like many artists, that I thought that's the way I wanted to go. And I struggled with the tension between academia and art school, and kind of leaning in quite an academic direction and being really interested in kind of words and books. I didn't quite know how to marry those two. And so in a way, the kind of rigors of figurative art kind of answered to some of that need. And yes, I started as a sort of highly observational figurative painter. I followed some painters down to Canterbury, where I got taught in the sort of Slade School, sort of followers of Ewan Uglow. His protégés taught our year group and other year groups, which was a kind of amazing discipline, and then, like everybody, you go to art school to learn the rules, and you spend the rest of your life trying to unlearn them. I think that's a kind of common thread, and to try and think and try to make work that's like truly honest to whatever it is that you're interested in. You're asking me about whether or not the work is all about the big pause, the stop, the breath. I don't find I'm quite chaotic in my mind, and busy, and can feel deep anxiety and worry, and in a way, which is something I struggle with. And in a way, the paintings, I hope, I don't believe that any emotion I have is unique. I think I'm just another bit player in the 6 million of us floating around the world, or maybe it's 8 now billion. And therefore, I hope the work helps me, so I hope it can help other people. I see it as a chance, giving people a door to take a pause, take a stop, think about things.
How do you go from, right, the rigors of that I keep calling it like the proper grown up, but the like traditional painting.
Yes.
Right. Where, you're drawing from life, you're drawing from the landscape or painting from the landscape. How do you that feels like a big, brave, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. And I'm going to paint purely from memory or imagination.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
It was very frightening. And it happened when I was quite old. It happened like at my 40th birthday, when I suddenly thought, look, you've got to stop being so frightened. If it doesn't happen now, if you don't stop being frightened now, you're never going to stop being frightened. And I think I used observational painting. Like, I had a show about books and shut books and my relationship with books. And it was called Still Reading. And all the books were shut. And they were about treasures. And they were like jewel-like paintings about this big. The tightness within that, I'm actually still really quite proud of some of the paintings, but the tightness within it, it was all about compressed emotion, tightly held memories, observational paintings, this sort of grip. So when I was asked to put on make this show at Saatchi, which was then Mind Zero, which was a huge turning point for me. That was when I just thought, right, come on, Nance. And I think I started calling the show Mind Clutter. We then realized that mind clutter, nobody wants to look at the clutter in my mind. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. I don't think anyone wants to see that show. But that idea of like a hodgepodge mind mapping almost. And then I realized, well, whilst making the work, because obviously like all of these things, you start off with one idea and you end up here because that's the nature of following an idea through. It's not about the kind of disparate thoughts. It's about a consistent single thought, and using kind of 20 years of figurative painting, observational painting, as a sort of recall memory to be able to make images which are from the heart.
No, it makes sense. Right. And let's talk about the specifics of your most recent show. So Stanza, which is up in Bellagio Lake Como right now. One of the things with those pieces is that the landscapes, they're not impossible, but they're like skewed. And I've had a really hard time explaining this to myself or like metabolizing this myself. But you often put like the audience up high, or or the audience comes in at an angle. Why are you making those decisions?
I think they're often quite instinctive, because I'm trying take Stanza, which I'm so thrilled that you came to see and we had such a nice time, and I'm really proud of that show. I really am. And I'm excited for the work, and I think in terms of kind of emotional painting, it's my most emotional show yet, because I wanted to paint it all entirely from memory, not using photos and referring to drawings. Invariably, we all see things from many angles. So when you paint something from memory, you're actually drawing on a recall from many points of view. So it's never as straightforward as I am here and the view is here, and there are a series of stage posts between my eyes and that landscape. And then if my eyes are here, the viewer is here. It's not as linear as that, which allows you to actually kind of play with all the perspectives and see things from so you kind of creep in down a branch, or come up from the sea, or come down from a mountain, because I want all of those journeys to be possible. Does that make sense?
Oh my God, so much sense. And you probably saw me grin from ear to ear as you said it, because I was like, that's what it is. You can crawl down a branch or you're climbing up something. And those access points, I think, are really helpful to the viewer. Okay, so you're 40. You have a show at the Serpentine. No,
Saatchi.
sorry, Saatchi. Other
love a
S.
show at Serpentine, but no, Saatchi.
It'll happen. Hans Ulrich Gilbrist, come on.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of out in the wild thinking about what's next, and you come up with this show to do what I think is like almost risk it all, right? You create a body of work that is based on a place that is so personal to you, but has this wider reputation, like this worldwide giant reputation. You say Lake Como to almost anyone on the globe and they'll be like, I've heard of it. Sure. But you're like, hang on, I'm going to show you a view of Lake Como that I've seen. Why? Why did you do that?
So in between Saatchi and Stanza, there was Gusto, this sort of the show that nobody saw. And it opened on the 31st of October and Rome shut on the 2nd of November with COVID. And it was a show about Keats. It was commissioned to be for the bicentennial of Keats's death at the Keats-Shelley House, Rome, which is that beautiful little museum at the base of the Spanish Steps. And I was super excited. It's like first institutional show. It's like literally combining all my interests of literature and Italy and all of these things for 1,000 reasons. I didn't realize that we went into making that show. So, it takes a year or so to make a body of work, that we were kind of be entering COVID. And Keats died in lockdown, essentially, because he went into quarantine when he first arrived in Rome on the Maria Crowther. He had to have 40 days there. Then he goes to Rome to try and get better from TB, and of course actually dies from TB, age 25, wrapped in this room, in this confinement, thinking about his own mortality. He has his life-death mask made when he's still... It's the most moving piece. It's the most moving life mask. It's just extraordinary. And his thesis is about the idea of creativity within confinement, essentially, like the free mind and the swamped body. And that's, of course, what we all had on a kind of global scale. So I had no idea that this show that I was going to make about Keats became this kind of mirroring of our time and his time. It was extraordinary and very emotional. And so it became about the idea of what it is, rather than celebrating Keats per se, it became a kind of thesis of what it is to make work within a state of physical confinement. So essentially of the mind entirely. I then made this pilgrimage to Italy to install the show because nothing was kind of straightforward. And then, I had great ideas of a lovely opening. I mean, who doesn't love an opening? It's great. People, you get together, you can all drink an Aperol. You can share one's love of all these things, and you emerge like a sort of blinking rabbit out of your own state of, into being surrounded by people you love. It's the best. The opening ended up being me and Philly, who was working in my studio at the time, having lunch and listening to the bells ringing and just leaving the works there. And then the doors shut in the museum. And for a 7-month show, it was open for 30 days and no one saw it. The only reason I mention that is because actually that was quite hard. And therefore, why I bring that into Bellagio is because, of course, the Romantics spent then lots of time up on the lakes. And so that kind of link between this kind of Roman experience, sort of deep exploration of, in particular, Keats's poetry, then seemed a sort of natural fit to then celebrating Bellagio and the Torre delle Arti and Lake Como under the umbrella of the Romantics. So both being like super personal to me because of my own history and time spent there and, getting married there and all sorts of wonderful things. But equally something which is a kind of a larger arc, that this is a place that has been inspiring for so many people, and that actually, why is it inspiring? It's not just inspiring because of sort of photos of sunglasses and Campari. It's inspiring because of the very sort of essence of the space, the lake and the mountains, the sort of horizontal and the vertical, and how you're sort of held within this landscape, which is sort of directly related to the kind of romantic sensibility. So, sorry, that's a very long-winded answer to your question. I'm so sorry. I sort of went off on one. But it is that sort of, I feel that those two things are quite interconnected.
Definitely. Along with this, like, I think you're so right to say that Como's reputation is about one thing, but what got everyone there in the first place? And it's kind of this notion of the sublime, right? You are properly embedded in that landscape when you're there, which I only know because you were so kind to invite me to the opening. But and that and I kept saying it to you over and over while we were there, that like, I'm looking at your work and then I look outside and things that I thought were impossible that are in your work are actually outside. And so that there's this weird, like, it's almost as if you're a photorealist painter who is interpreting the thing that we feel when we're there. So you're not a photorealist at all. Anyone can look at the work and see that, but it captures the essence of that place in such an extraordinary way.
It was so, on at the opening, which you were at, I was so thrilled that night, there we were in the kind of piazza, which was just magic. For me, I hope everyone else enjoyed it too. I had a lovely time. And I was thrilled that, there's the crescent moon as a recurring, as an image of hope and the passing of time, and where we are we waxing, are we waning, it sits in the pictures. And I was so thrilled that night, hanging above Bellagio, was this sort of almost pregnant perfect crescent moon, just sort of hanging there for us. Oh, it was magic. And the next morning I opened my window and there was a sleeping swan.
No, but that happened that whole weekend. It was bizarre. It was as if you were manifesting all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, same with me. I opened my curtains and was like, oh my God, that's the lake in the painting. That's the thing. Talk me through symbolism.
Ooh.
So
yes.
When the work has a few things that recur, right? Birds being one of them.
Absolutely.
Books. Are you sort of peppering these canvases with things that you want us to look at and read?
Absolutely. So I think there's a kind of many aspects to still life. Or yes, exactly, to still life, to moving still life, to however you want to see it. The birds, I don't think of myself as a symbolist painter, but I must be, because I think things have symbols, so I therefore suppose it's symbolism. The bird is a recurring theme, and in a way, it's a call for attention. It's to remind you. I do these little drawings in my sketchbook, which is that if a lot of the work is about finding peace, essentially finding stillness, finding a sort of clarity, a sort of a flow state, if your head is full of clutter, you don't hear the birdsong. So I always have that as a mantra to myself. When I open my back door and I let the dog out, I've got my morning cup of tea, I'm like, am I listening? Because if I'm not listening, this is going too fast and this is noisy and I need to listen. And if I can hear the birdsong, ultimately I'm okay. I'm grounded, like it's okay. So I say the bird has then become this kind of recurring motif, either sitting on a teacup or sitting on a shoulder or just there on a branch or just looking, just like reminding you. And it's often a blackbird, because blackbird has a beautiful song. And also pictorially, I really like the orange beak. I like that little spot of orange. It just peppers a painting really beautifully, I think. So essentially that is a symbol. It is a symbol. The books, because that kind of element of sustained concentration is something I think that we're all struggling with increasingly. We take in information too quickly. We don't actually spend enough time properly digesting it. And that's just a byproduct of, the life we live, the way we consume our lives. So in a way, I sort of think the kind of books and painting are the last bastion for sustained and long thought and holding attention, and in that moment allowing a communion essentially to happen between you and whatever it is you're looking at or reading, that these things become the conduit to to some form of clarity.
How long do your paintings take?
Yeah, well, some of them take years.
Do they?
Yeah. I've got one still on the go from 2019, actually. I keep putting it on the wall, and then I'm like, and then I sort of take it off the wall. And then I try and work on a whole body of work as a whole because I want it to hang together as a whole. So I want to be making the final brush marks almost in one day, like the final, bring it together so it has a sort of lovely continuity and you'll feel you're holding your viewer, you're sort of protecting your viewer with your pictures.
There's a book called Too Much Blue by Percival Everett, I think it is.
Okay.
Everett.
Looks at, never heard of it.
Everett. It's really neat. And actually another artist told me to read it. And he has a painting in this book that's like a central figure. This sounds so heady and annoying. It's not. It's a really easy read and it's wonderful and you should read it. But that he won't show anyone that he's been working on almost his entire life, and it's like blocked away, and I won't spoil it. But I was like, is that accurate? And it sounds like it is, right? That like an artist can sit with a work for their entire life.
Absolutely. And you change with it and it grows with you, and some ones don't ever quite work, or they do work, or too much blue. I mean, that's a problem. I paint a lot of blue. Blue is a color I use a lot over many variations of, so I sort of feel anxious. I thought, I should definitely read that.
Yeah, you'll like the conclusion. I'll send you a copy. I've got two sitting around. How about the figures? Right? What about the figures in your work? How do you see them functioning?
It's interesting, isn't it? They're all female, which I get asked about quite a lot. And that started again at the Mind Zero show, these kind of female figures appeared in the work. And I was trying to work out what that was. I suppose I don't feel kind of entitled. Well, not entitled is the wrong word, but I don't feel I can tell like a man's story. I kind of feel like a woman's story is something I'm deeply involved in and rooted in. And in a kind of age of authenticity, I don't want to be disingenuous with the work I make. They are all dark-haired women with brown eyes and dark hair. So obviously no autobiography going on. They're painted from my imagination, and they're strong, timeless figures. There's no kind of obvious references to modernity or contemporary life. I think the things that I'm interested in painting about have been painted about and being talked about forever. So I don't actually feel they necessarily need to be rooted in an obviously contemporary landscape. I think the subject is in itself contemporary. So these sort of women, they have their dark hair and they always have their eyes shut. And again, I think that is because, I spent years painting portraits and I still paint people. But I have their eyes shut because I think as soon as somebody's eyes are open, you always are drawn to the human in the picture. And their eyes are open, you, without even realizing it, you will start having a conversation with them directly and wanting to know what they're thinking about. And that leads you down to a very different direction where they become the subject of the painting. And I want the figure to be a vehicle in the painting more than the subject of the painting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But you do it without objectifying, right? And I struggled with this at first, or I struggled with trying to explain it to myself, right? Because we all know, like, we want women in canvases or photographs who are engaging the viewer.
Yes.
Because we don't need women to continually be objectified. And so in the history of art, right? We've already talked about all this over and over and over. Like the women, they can't be there to be looked at. And somehow your figures resist this like to be looked at female. And sure, they're not sexualized. So that's one part removed. But
I think they're content within their space. They are solid, and I hope that and I hear what you're saying, and I'd never even thought of it because I never think of the viewer looking at the woman. I always think of the viewer. So it's really interesting that, Carrie. I always think of the viewer being like with the woman,
right.
Never at the woman. It's all in the preposition. That's so interesting. I don't think, I hope that they are so in their world, content within their world, that they are an invitation to join them in their world rather than you looking on to them. I don't feel they're caged. I mean, obviously paintings are rectangles, so you can see the rectangle as a cage. And often there's the whole thing about taking the painting off the rectangle, moving it to the wall, moving it to the floor. These ways of kind of freeing the subject. But I find the rectangle of a painting ultimately very liberating and exciting. So I hope that the figures within it are not sort of caged within the parameters. Does that make sense?
But that comes back to this whole thing of these skewed ways in, right? In one of the works, I don't remember the title, but she's kind of got her like shoulder and back to you and the table. What's that one called? I don't know.
Is she in the red dress?
Yes.
After Reynolds.
You know, she's there almost like you've walked into her room, but then there's sort of three other ways that you're led into that painting. And I think because of that, yeah, you don't end up feeling separate from the scene.
And it's exactly the word I was thinking of, scene. I don't believe they are scene paintings. I think they're paintings of ideas with using figurative models as a mode of expression. I don't see them as scene paintings. That would have a very much a single viewpoint, a much more classical perspective. And therefore, and if you painted that almost like the stage set we were talking about earlier, then I could see the woman could be trapped behind the table, that we will be looking at her. I think we're not looking at her. I think we're entirely with her. And that is because she's an idea.
So, and going back to symbolism, why do shows have brown hair and brown eyes? I mean, obviously that's because it's the ideal here.
Absolutely. Because exactly that, you know.
No, but jokes aside, right? My best friend in the whole world growing up and still now is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who always got all the attention of people around her. And that, like, blondes have more fun. We know all these cliches. So why choose the brunette?
Well, I always thought the brunette was more enigmatic. I think they have mystery. I used to yearn for mystery. Mystique was probably one of my passwords as a teenager. I thought if I typed it every day, I might get some. No, I feel this is all too obvious. You can see everything that's happening here. I suppose there's also fear, isn't there? There's an element of kind of hiding behind, you know, I really, really struggle with a huge amount of fear. And I suppose the brunette allows me to disappear behind that and takes the obvious autobiography out of it and allows it to be more universal. I'm not that interested in I don't really want to go to a gallery and look at a lot of pictures of me in a thinking pose. I think that would be so boring. I don't know. But I think an omni woman, a kind of beautiful, dark hair, brown-eyed, like mysterious, I also paint a lot of red wine. I don't really drink that much red wine, but I really like the color.
It all just comes down to color.
Yeah, and often a lot of it comes out like I really like what those kind of deep alizarans can do in paintings. They're kind of strong, kind of muscular colors. I don't want the paintings aren't flighty. They're not. They have an element of lyricism, but they're but they need to be, they need to be sound in their ideas and their thinking and the kind of intellectual rigor behind them.
And they definitely are. And you definitely are a symbolist. I mean, I think that if this conversation has proved anything, it's that for me, which I love. What's next? Can you tell us what's next?
Well, I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? So luckily, it's all about trees is what's next. And I was working on the trees before the lakes came about. And then you know how it is, this sort of idea suddenly comes and then you sort of put something to side because you have to delve into one project. I can only work on one big project at a time because it's too rattling. So I've got this project on the go called The Lost Trees, and it's a really, again, extremely personal show about basically the figure in the landscape. And in the stanza, we have a lot of the figure in the landscape. So a sense of the pastoral idyll, about how we measure time, about our relationship with trees, and storytelling, our kind of personal and community storytelling around the tree. Small topic.
I mean, just tiny, just the tree, the history of the tree.
No, it's not the history of the tree. It's mainly based on trees that have been felled. And there's an element, I do believe that painting has got it can be very strong, it can be very positive. And I want to make images that ultimately provide some good. So there's been, all these trees have been felled, no more obviously than Sycamore Gap, for example, which the whole country quite rightly was distraught about. I want to tell the stories of what those trees did. I want them to be like huge, great big memorials to lost trees. Around us, around where I live in the countryside, masses of trees have been felled because of HS2, ancient oak trees, which all talk to each other. And if the painting's about awareness and time, which I think are my two main theses throughout my whole life, really, the trees are the perfect kind of symbol and vehicle for that. And I want to be making these works that tell other people's stories and their relationships with particular trees, and making paintings honouring these kind of amazing giants that aren't around anymore, owing to our own human folly, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I have so many things to say about that. In terms of trees, I recently learned through another artist, or 3 years ago, but recently enough, about when America redlined so many of the cities and made a affluent part and a not so affluent part, impoverished communities. They took out the trees because they didn't want people to congregate. So when you look at American cities... Oh my
God, is that true?
True. Like 100% true. And sorry, so when you were saying it, I was like, that as a political act, removing trees is a thing that we don't know enough about. But because it's hotter in those communities, right? If you don't have shade, you won't have people. You won't have people that congregate. And because they're a natural place where people do gather. You look at parks, where do people sit? Under the trees. Right?
They always sit under the trees. They always gather under the trees. And how the trees tell the story of the soil below us, and they talk above us, and we are literally just a little bit in the middle. There's something, many people are talking and writing about trees at the moment. And I love it. It's wonderful and important. And I think it links really, really well with the lakes, actually, because they're all tied up with these, they're all bucolics in a sense, their ideals and their ideas and memories.
Oh, man. I am excited about that. Okay, true to my word, we're keeping this to 30 minutes, even though I could literally sit here all day. Do me a favor and tell anyone that's listening, watching, where they can find you online if they want to go and see more.
Oh, sweet you. Oh, well, I'm on the Insta.
Yes.
I'm on the Insta at Nancy Cadogan Studio. And the work is on, Stanza is on until the 5th of August in Bellagio, if you're passing through Lake Como. And more to follow.
Thank you, Nancy, so much. Your work is a gift, really.
Thank you.
So I hope everyone goes to check it out. And I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon. Thank you. Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Scene Podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to connect with us between episodes, follow us on Instagram at WatchSceneArt. I'm Carrie Scott, and I'll see you next time. Get it?